When I think about that time in my life, I still get a shiver. It's one of those things where you wonder if it's something you made up or not. Even though I know what I saw, I still find myself going back and forth about whether or not it was real. It all started when I was living by myself in an old house. It's a fixer-upper for sure, but it's mine and I'm proud of it. I've always been a little bit of a loner, so living alone wasn't a big deal for me. One day, I started noticing that things were being moved around. It was subtle at first. The couch would be in a slightly different spot, or a picture would be hung on a different wall. I thought I was losing my mind, to be honest. That or the house was haunted, which is a thought I quickly dismissed. My suspicions were confirmed the first time I woke up and felt something warm next to me. Looking to my side, I saw a man sleeping right beside me as if he owned the place. A stranger was in my bed, in my home. I jolted awake and tried to scream, but he put a hand over my mouth before I could make a sound. I wanted to fight, to flee, but I was too scared to move. I must have passed out because the next thing I knew, I was alone. I checked the doors and windows and they were all locked, which made me wonder how the hell that man got in. That night was the first of many sleepless nights. I started to notice more and more strange things within the following days. The TV would turn on by itself, or the lights would flicker or dim even if they were brand new. I felt like I was going crazy, like I was imagining all of it. One night, I was sitting in the living room, reading a book, when I heard a noise in the kitchen. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. As I listened, I could hear someone moving around, opening and closing cabinets. Slowly, I got up and crept towards the kitchen. I held my breath as I peeked around the doorway, my heart threatening to leap out of my chest when I saw him again, the stranger from my bed. He was standing in the middle of the darkness, his back to me. I could see the outline of his body, and he was huge, big and bulky. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to run, to escape and call the cops, but another part of me was frozen with fear, unable to move a muscle. And suddenly, he turned and locked his eyes with mine. His eyes were coal black, like two voids in the darkness. I let out a cry and bolted, running out of the kitchen and into the living room before slamming the door shut and locking it. I was panting, my whole body shaking. I called the cops and the police came, but by the time they arrived, the stranger was gone, leaving no trace whatsoever. I don't know how he got out, but they never did find him. I never saw him again, but I never forgot his face or his empty, black eyes. I still live in that house, but I'm always on high alert. I double-check that all the doors and windows are locked every night, and I never go out alone at night. I don't know who that man was or what he wanted, but I'll never forget the terror of having a stranger living inside my home. It's the kind of thing that stays with you no matter how hard you try to forget it. I keep meeting this stranger around town, and each time, my unease deepens. Maybe it's his piercing gaze or the cryptic smile that lingers on his lips. I can't shake the feeling that there's something sinister about him. The first time I saw him, I was at the local coffee shop. He was sitting by the window, his laptop open, but he wasn't working. He was just staring out, his eyes lost in the distance. When my gaze met his, there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, but it quickly disappeared, replaced by a blank stare. Over the next few weeks, I saw him again and again. At the grocery store, in the park, even at my gym. He never approached me, never even acknowledged my presence. But there was something about his appearance that disturbed me, like a shadow that refused to leave. One evening, as I was walking home from work, I turned a corner and came face to face with him. He was standing in the middle of the sidewalk, blocking my path. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hello," he said, a slight smile curling his lips. His voice was smooth and polite, but there was something eerie about it. I took a step back, trying to maintain some distance. "What do you want?" I asked. "Oh, nothing," he chuckled. "I just wanted to chat." "There's nothing to chat about," I said, trying to sidestep him. But he reached out and grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. I gasped and tried to pull away, but he held on tight. "Let me go," I shouted. He laughed softly, his smile growing wider. "I don't think so." In that moment, I knew I was in danger. He had a look in his eyes that I had never seen before, a predatory gleam that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to kick him, to scream for help, but it was no use. He was too strong, too determined. He dragged me down a side street and into a dark alley. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear his footsteps approaching me through the darkness. Then, I felt his cold hands on my face, caressing my skin. "Don't worry," he whispered. "It'll be over soon." His breath was hot on my lips as he leaned in for a kiss. I tried to turn my head away, but he held my chin firm, forcing me to look into his eyes. And then, just when I thought all hope was lost, something unexpected happened. A familiar sound echoed through the alley, breaking the dead silence. It was the sound of footsteps. The stranger's face changed instantly. Panic flashed across his features, and he pushed me away so hard that I fell to the ground. "You're fine," he hissed. "But if you tell anyone about this, I'll kill you." He turned and disappeared into the darkness, leaving me lying there in the cold, wet alley. I lay there for a long time, shivering and crying. When I finally got the courage to call for help, people came running to my aid. The police launched an investigation, but the stranger was never found. He vanished like a ghost, leaving only a trail of fear and uncertainty in his wake. I've never been the same since that night. I'm afraid to leave the house alone, and I can't shake the feeling that the stranger is still out there, watching me, waiting for his chance to take his revenge. The unwelcome houseguest has left an uninvited terror in my life, and I know that it will never truly leave. I was driving back home from work one night, feeling weary and alone in my car. The roads were desolate, and the night was unnaturally quiet. As I approached a dark intersection, a sudden noise made me jump. A figure darted out onto the road, silhouetted against the dim streetlights. I slammed on my brakes, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure, a tall, lanky man dressed in black, stood frozen in the middle of the road. His face was obscured by a baseball cap, but his piercing blue eyes seemed to bore into me. He held something in his hand, but I couldn't make out what it was. Shaking, I rolled down my window. "Excuse me?" I said. "Can I help you?" He didn't respond, just stared at me with a strange, almost predatory gleam in his eyes. A wave of unease washed over me as I realized his eyes were too pale, almost white. He looked unnatural. Finally, his lips parted, and he spoke in a voice that sent shivers down my spine. "You're lost, aren't you?" I was taken aback. "No," I replied. "I'm just heading home." He took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. "You're not lost, you're alone," he said, his voice a low, sinister whisper. Suddenly, terror surged through me. I fumbled for my phone, but it had disappeared. Panic began to consume me as I realized I was trapped. "Get out of my car," he hissed, his voice dropping to an almost inaudible murmur. I couldn't move. Fear paralyzed me as I watched him approach, his footsteps heavy and relentless. He reached the passenger side window and leaned in, his cold breath on my face. His eyes glowed with a sinister intensity, and I felt a chill run through my bones. "You're not going home tonight," he whispered, his words sending a wave of icy terror through me. "Help me!" I screamed, but my voice was trapped in my throat. He chuckled, a cruel and menacing sound. "No one will help you now," he said. His hand darted forward, holding a gleaming knife. With lightning speed, he plunged it into my side. Pain exploded through my body as darkness consumed me. As I lay dying, I could hear him whispering, his voice a sinister lullaby. "Rest in peace, my dear traveler. Your journey ends here." And with that, the world went black.